Ambassador Chu Yong walked into the huge room. It was the main meeting place for the Galactic Concord. The ceiling was made of something like crystal, letting in soft-colored light. Strange, beautiful music floated in the air. It was supposed to feel peaceful and wise. To Chu Yong, it just felt fake. She was here to ask for help, to show them a crime. But she knew, deep in her bones, they would not listen. For 50 years, humans had tried to join this group. They had done everything asked of them. They took apart their big warships. They shared their best technology, the kind that could make dead planets live again. They followed every silly rule about trade and talking. All they wanted was a real seat at the big table, a voice, a little respect. Now they needed that respect. A world called Proxima Centauri b was in trouble. It was a colony, a hard piece of work. Humans had spent decades making the cold rock warm and its air breathable. Families lived there. Scientists worked there. It was a piece of Earth far away. The HFY Collective had taken it. They were a species of tall, scaly reptiles. They were proud and loved war. Their big ships had appeared in Proxima's sky. They landed their soldiers. They attacked the human outposts. The messages from the surface had stopped suddenly, one by one. The last one was just static and the sound of screaming. Chu Yong stepped onto the small speaking platform for humans. It was at the very edge of the huge room, far from the center. She felt every eye in the room on her. Not eyes of friends, but eyes of judges. She took a deep breath. She began to speak. She showed them pictures. Maps of human settlements on Proxima. She played recordings of HFY warships breaking the rules of space. She showed the official documents, signed by the Concord itself, that said Proxima belonged to humans. Her voice was clear and calm. She explained the attack. She asked for the Concord's help. She asked them to make the HFY leave. When she finished, the room was quiet. Then, Arch-Commander Vel of the HFY stood up. He was big, his scales a polished green and black. He did not look at the pictures. He did not talk about Proxima. He talked about humans. They are a young, angry species, he said, his voice a low hiss that filled the room. They feel things too strongly. They fight among themselves. Look at their history. Wars, always wars. Giving them a colony was a mistake. They are not ready. They are unstable, a danger to the calm of the galaxy. Chu Yong felt her face get hot. He was talking about her people like they were wild animals. She wanted to shout, but she stayed quiet. She had to follow the rules. Next, Speaker Liss of the Velinar hegemony stood. The Velinars looked like large, graceful frogs. They were famous for their tricky words. Liss spoke in a slippery, wet voice. The human. Concern is noted, Liss said. But we must think of the bigger picture. The disturbance this causes. The HFY are a strong force in that part of space. Perhaps it is better for peace, if they manage this world, to avoid more fighting. One by one, the other species spoke. The insectoid Mir, who always agreed with the strongest side. The gas cloud beings of Xylos, who talked about energy balances. Not one of them talked about right and wrong. Not one talked about the humans who might be dead on Proxima. They talked about power. They talked about keeping things easy for themselves. Finally, it was time to vote. The question was not about helping Earth. The question was a new one, written by Vel and Liss. It asked the Concord to give custodianship of Proxima Centauri b to the HFY Collective, for regional safety and stability. Chu Yong's heart beat hard against her ribs. She looked at the faces of the ambassadors. She saw no guilt, no shame, just boredom. Just the quiet look of people who have already decided to do a bad thing and just want to get it over with. The voting lights began to shine. Green for yes, red for no. One by one, around the giant circle, green lights appeared. The mirror, green. The xylos, green. The veliners, a bright, shameful green. Soon it was a circle of green lights. It was unanimous. Every single species in the Galactic Concord voted to give away a human world to the thieves who stole it. The soft music came back. Arch Commander Vel made a small bow, a mean smile on his lipless mouth. Speaker Liss began talking about the next boring topic on the list. The meeting moved on. It was as if Chu Yong and her whole world had never spoken. She stood frozen on her little platform. The betrayal was so complete, so cold, it felt like all the air had been sucked from the room. They had done everything right. They had been peaceful. They had been patient. And for what? So a room full of aliens could give their hard-earned home to a bunch of scaly bullies. A sharp vibration on her wrist made her jump. It was her private comlink, hidden under her sleeve. A message was coming in. It was from Earth, from Central Command. It was text-only coded. It was a single phrase. A phrase from an old Earth story about a man who took a very long journey to get back to his home. The code was, Odysseus endure. Chu Yong read the words. Her despair, a heavy cold stone in her gut, cracked. Inside that crack, a new feeling grew. It was not hope. It was hotter, sharper. It was fury. A clean, white, burning fury. The message meant one thing. The waiting was over. The game was done. She looked up from her wrist. Her eyes found Arch Commander Vel across the room. He was talking to another reptile, not even looking at her. The dismissed human. She looked at Speaker Liss, who was studying a screen. Chu Yong pressed a button on her podium. It was her right to give a final word. The gentle music cut off. All the alien faces turned to her, annoyed at the interruption. She did not raise her voice. She did not shout. But her words, in the sudden quiet, were like stones dropped into a still pond. You have made a mistake, she said. Her voice was calm, flat, and carried to every corner. You looked at our patience, and you called it weakness. You saw our hope, and you called it foolishness. You took our kindness for a lack of strength. She paused, looking at Vel, then at Liss, and around the circle of green lights. You have just made the last mistake your civilizations will ever make. Before anyone could react, before Vel could hiss a reply, or Liss could make a slippery excuse, Chu Yong turned. She stepped off the platform. Her shoes made a sharp, clear sound on the floor as she walked out of the crystal dome. She did not look back. She walked down the shining hallway, past confused alien guards, and into the human diplomatic shuttle dot. As the shuttle door closed, she finally let the mask fall. Her hands were shaking, but it was not from fear. It was from the energy of the fury inside her. The shuttle pilot, a young woman named Su Min, looked at her with wide eyes. Ambassador? What happened? Chu Yong sat down, strapping herself in. They voted against us. All of them. She saw the shock and horror on Su Min's face. Do not be afraid, Chu Yong said, her voice now as hard as space rock. Send a message to Central Command. Tell them the harvest is ripe, and the reapers are on their way. As the shuttle pulled away from the Concord station, Chu Yong looked out the window. The station looked like a beautiful jewel floating in the dark. She knew it was a rotten thing. A pretty shell full of liars and cowards. Her comlink buzzed again. It was another coded message. Coordinates. A location to go to, deep in a lonely part of space, away from Concord sensors. A safe place. A waiting place. She leaned back in her seat. The galaxy thought humanity was broken. They thought we would cry, or beg, or just fade away quietly. They were wrong. They had pushed the peaceful, patient animal into a corner. And now they were about to meet the teeth it had been hiding all along. The long journey was over. Now the journey home would begin. And it would be a blazing one. While the Concord ambassadors slept easy, thinking they had solved the human problem, the Kithari fleet arrived in the Sol system. They came with the pride of thieves who had been given the key. Arch-Commander Vel himself watched from his command ship, the Claw of Victory. He saw the blue marble of Earth and the red dot of Mars. He felt nothing but hunger. The humans had nice things. Soon the Kithari would have them. They moved toward Mars first. The big red planet had human cities under big glass domes. It had mining stations. It was a good first prize. A few small human defense ships moved to meet them. Old models. Police cutters mostly. Vel gave a hissing laugh. See? They have nothing. Sweep them aside. Then take the main port city. Show them who owns this system now. His ships opened fire. The human cutters fought bravely, but they were too small. They were blown apart. The Kithari soldiers began landing on Mars. People in the domes screamed and ran. The news went out to Earth. Mars was under attack. It seemed hopeless, but far away, in the darkest, coldest parts of the solar system, other things were moving. Out past Neptune, in the Kuiper Belt, where the sun is just a bright star, a large, jagged rock floated. It looked dead. But inside, deep in its heart, lights came on. A hidden door, covered in perfect fake ice, slid open. From the dark hole, a shape glided out. It was a ship, but not like any ship the Concord had ever seen. It was all sharp angles and flat gray surfaces. It had no beauty. It looked like a knife. This was the vengeance of Guangzhou. And it was not a lone dot all across the outer system. The hiding places opened up. From inside the thick, swirling clouds of Jupiter, massive shapes powered up and rose. In the deep quiet of the Oort cloud, more rock-like shells cracked apart. Ships poured out. Big ships. Ships with thick armor and huge guns. This was the Ghost Fleet, Project Odysseus. For 50 years, while humans talked peace, they had been building. Not in space stations where everyone could see, but in secret, in the forgotten places. On the bridge of the Vengeance, Captain Lee DeHayon stood straight. He watched the main screen fill with green dots. Each dot was a human warship, reporting in. He allowed himself one small, hard smile. Commander Park Ji-woo stood next to him at the tactical station. Her fingers flew over her screen, checking every ship, every system. "All squadrons reporting ready, Captain," she said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were bright with fire. "The Kithari are hitting Mars. Their main fleet is there. They are not looking out here." "Good," Lee Dae-hayon said. "Let's give them something to look at. Bring the core to full power. Set course for Mars. Maximum speed." Down in the engineering room, Chief Engineer Shin Yuna heard the captain's order. She was a small woman with strong hands covered in light grease. She stood in front of the main reactor. It was not a normal engine. It was something the humans had invented in secret. A contained black hole, a tiny singularity, giving out huge power. She slapped the main control. "All right, little monster," she muttered to the machine. "Time to wake up and work." A deep, shaking hum filled the ship. The lights glowed brighter. The Vengeance began to move. It was slow at first, then faster and faster. Behind it, hundreds of other ships followed. They were a silent avalanche of steel and anger, falling toward the inner system. Back at Mars, the Cathari were having fun. They broke the dome of a small mining town. The air rushed out. They watched from their ships as humans in emergency suits ran like ants. Arch Commander Vel was planning his speech to Earth. He would demand their surrender. He would make them slaves. It would be easy. Then one of his sensor officers made a worried sound. Arch Commander, we are detecting many objects from the outer system, moving very fast. Vel turned. Many? How many? Pirate scavengers? Over 200. Big signatures. Their energy readings. I have never seen anything like it. Before Vel could answer, a new voice came over all the communication channels. It was a human voice, calm, clear, and very cold. Cathari Fleet. This is Captain Li De Hyan of the Terran sovereignty vessel Vengeance of Guangzhou. You are in unlawful possession of human space. You have attacked our people. Disengage your weapons. Power down your drives. Surrender immediately, or you will be destroyed. On the bridge of the Vengeance, Li De Hyan waited. He knew what the answer would be. On his screen, he saw the Cathari ships turning, pointing their guns away from Mars, pointing them at his fleet. On the claw of victory, Vel was furious. A human was giving him orders? This was a trick. These ships must be empty or fakes. He would not be scared by shadows. He opened his own channel, his hiss loud and full of pride. Human Captain, you have no authority here. The Concord has given us this system. You will surrender your ships to me, or we will burn your worlds to ash. Li De Hyan looked at Park Ji-woo. She looked back and gave a single nod. Everything was ready. He looked at the main screen, at the image of the arrogant reptile. You were warned, he said softly. Then he cut the channel. He nodded to Ji-woo. Execute. What happened next was not a battle like the Cathari knew. They expected ships to line up and fire big guns. A fight of honor. The humans did not fight with honor. They fought to win. First, a cloud of small objects shot out from the human fleet. Thousands of them. They were drones, cheap and simple. They flew straight at the Cathari fleet, not firing, just getting closer. The Cathari point defense guns started shooting them down. It was easy. Too easy. The drones kept coming. A storm of metal. They are trying to overwhelm us. Focus fire. Vel shouted. But that was the trick. While the Cathari guns were busy with the drones, the real human ships moved. They did not move in a group. They split apart. Some went left, some went right, some dropped down. They attacked from every direction at once. Then, the big human ships, like the Vengeance, fired their main weapons. They did not fire lasers or plasma bolts. They fired solid metal rods longer than a bus. They were called railgun slugs. They were fired with so much force that when they hit a Cathari ship, they did not explode. They just punched straight through, leaving a perfect hole. Air, fire, and people were sucked out into space. Vel's ship shook. What was that? Report. Our shield did nothing. It went right through. The bright fang is gone. A single shot. Before Vel could understand, Commander Park Ji-woo gave the next order. Sunlance crews fire at will. On the sides of the human ships, panels opened. Long, thick barrels came out. They glowed with a terrible white light. Then thin, bright beams of pure energy lanced out. These were the Sunlances. Where they touched a Cathari shield, the shield sparked and died in a second. Where they touched the ship's armor, the armor melted like ice. The Vengeance targeted the claw of victory. The beam hit. The command ship's shield flashed and disappeared. The beam cut into the hull, slicing through decks and rooms. Alarms screamed. Vel was thrown from his chair. He saw fire. He heard his crew screaming. This was impossible. Humans were weak. Humans were peaceful. These could not be humans. On the Vengeance, Sergeant Kim Tae-seok watched the battle on a screen in the Marine room. His squad was in their big power armor, ready to drop to Mars. He saw the Cathari ships burning. He felt no pity, only a cold satisfaction. "Look at them run," one of his Marines, a young man named June, said. "They ran from our homes too," Kim Tae-seok said. "Now we chase them. Get ready. The captain will give us the word soon. We're going down to Mars to say hello." The battle for Mars was over in less than an hour. The Cathari fleet was broken. Half their ships were floating junk. The other half were trying to escape. The human ghost fleet moved to cut them off. They were like wolves around scared sheep. Captain Lee Dae-hyun watched the last of the fighting. He felt no joy. Only a grim need to finish the job. He opened a channel again, this time broadcasting to every Cathari ship and to any Concord listener who might be hearing. The Cathari Collective has been punished for its theft at Proxima. Now they are punished for their attack on Mars. Any species that helped them or agreed with their theft is now an enemy of the Terran sovereignty. Stand down, or you will be next. In the ruined bridge of the Claw of Victory, Arch Commander Vel heard the words. He pulled himself up, bleeding from a cut on his head. He looked at the image of the sharp, gray human ship on his broken screen. For the first time in his life, he felt it. Not anger, not pride. He felt fear. Cold, deep, real fear. He had not been fighting farmers with old guns. He had kicked the sleeping dragon. And now the whole galaxy was about to feel its fire. The news spread through the galaxy like a shockwave. No one could believe it at first. The Cathari fleet, one of the strongest in the Concord, had been smashed. By humans. It was not possible. But the proof was there. Silent, burned ships floated near Mars. Broken Cathari escape pods sent out weak distress calls. No one answered them. On Earth, people watched the news. They had been scared. They had heard about Mars. They thought they were next. Then they saw the images of the strange, sharp human ships. They heard Captain Lee's voice. A feeling they had almost forgotten began to spread. It was not just relief. It was pride. A fierce, hot pride. But in the halls of the Galactic Concord, the feeling was very different. It was panic. The ambassadors who had voted to give away Proxima now looked at each other with wide, worried eyes. They had made a terrible mistake. They tried to say the humans had broken the law. They said the human fleet was illegal. But their words sounded weak, even to themselves. The Velinar hegemony took charge. Speaker Liss, the one who had talked about disturbance, now spoke about galactic security. The humans had dangerous weapons. They were clearly unstable. They had to be stopped for everyone's good. Many species agreed. They were afraid of the Cathari, but this new human fleet scared them more. It was unknown. It was angry. The Concord did not declare war. They called it a peacekeeping action. They gathered a new fleet. It was the biggest fleet the galaxy had seen in 1,000 years. Ships from the Velinor, the Mir, the Xylos, and others. Even some broken Cathari ships joined them. They all met at a place called Cygnus Reach. It was a big, colorful cloud of gas and dust in space. A good place to hide and plan. They had a plan. The Velinor had special ships. They could drain energy from other ships' weapons and shields. They would weaken the humans. Then the big Mir Crushers and the Xylos Energy Weavers would finish them. They outnumbered the humans 4-1. It was, they thought, a sure thing. Speaker Liss felt confident. On the flagship, Harmony of Will, Liss spoke to the fleet. We do not fight for conquest. We fight for order. We fight for peace. The humans have chosen fire. We will put it out. The other captains sent back messages of agreement. They believed their own words. The human ghost fleet was not hiding. It moved toward Cygnus Reach in a steady, solid group. They knew the Concorde was there. They had listened to their messages. On the bridge of the Vengeance of Gwangju, Captain Lee Dae-hyun studied the enemy formation on the big screen. It was a massive wall of ships, glowing with pretty lights. Commander Park Ji-woo stood beside him. Their formation is tight. Textbook. They expect us to come straight at them. The Velenar energy siphons are in the front. They will try to suck our power dry. Lee Dae-hyun nodded slowly. They think we will fight their way. They are wrong. He turned to his chair and opened a channel to the whole fleet. His face was calm. All captains. This is Lee. They have more ships. They have fancy technology. They have the blessing of the Concorde. He paused. But they have never fought us. They have never fought someone with nothing left to lose. Execute plan. Scorched Nebula. Good hunting. The words Scorched Nebula went out. On every human ship, engineers and weapons officers moved quickly. This was not a normal battle plan. Chief Engineer Shin Yuna, on the Vengeance, was at the heart of it. Her team had loaded special missiles into the launch tubes. They were not for ships. They were big, slow, and full of a strange magnetic fluid. Are the MHDs ready? She barked into her headset. Ready, Chief, came the reply. On the captain's mark, you fire them right into the thickest part of the nebula gas. Not at the ships. At the cloud. Out in space, the Concorde fleet saw the humans coming. They were ready. The Velenar ships powered up their siphons. Big, swirling holes of light opened on their bows, waiting to drink human energy. The human fleet stopped just outside of weapon range. They did not fire. For a long moment, nothing happened. The two giant fleets just looked at each other across the colorful nebula. Then, from the human ships, a volley of missiles launched. They were slow. The Concorde point defense guns easily shot them down. Speaker Liss felt a moment of confusion, then satisfaction. See? Their weapons are primitive. They are no match for us. But the missiles were not shot at the ships. They were shot near the ships. When they were destroyed, they burst open in the middle of the nebula cloud. They did not explode with fire. They released a dark, shimmering dust into the colorful gas. What is that? A Velenar officer asked. On the Vengeance, Shin Yuna watched her screens. The special dust was spreading. It was a catalyst. It made the nebula's hydrogen gas very, very unstable. Magnetic field is spiking, she said, a smile touching her lips. The soup is ready. Captain Lee said one word. Ignite. A second wave of missiles fired. These were different. They carried a single, powerful energy pulse. They flew into the cloud where the dark dust was thickest. They detonated. For 1 second, nothing. Then, space itself seemed to catch fire. The nebula at Cygnus Reach was full of hydrogen. The human weapons triggered a chain reaction. A wave of fusion fire bloomed from the center of the cloud. It was not an explosion. It was an ignition. The entire nebula began to burn, a wave of raw star fire rushing outward in all directions. The Concorde fleet was right next to it, the beautiful, colorful gas turned into a wall of plasma 10,000 kilometers high. It hit the front of the Concorde fleet. The Velenar siphons, designed for controlled energy, were overwhelmed. They shattered. The pretty lights of the Mir and Xylos ships were swallowed by the brighter, hotter light of the artificial sun. Ships melted. Shields vanished like fog in sunlight. Communications became screams of static and then silence. The human fleet, far back and ready, saw the wave coming. They turned their special heat-dispersing shields toward it. The wave of fire washed over them. The ships shook. Alarms sounded. But they held. When the fire passed, the space before them was changed. The nebula was a bright, burning ball. A third of the Concorde peacekeeping fleet was gone, vaporized. Another third was drifting, broken, their systems dead. Only the back of the fleet, furthest from the nebula, was still in one piece. And they were in total panic. "Now," said Captain Lee, his voice cold. The human fleet moved forward. They were not merciful. They moved through the burning wreckage. They targeted engines. They took out weapons. They did not kill every ship. They made sure none could fight back. The Vengeance moved toward the Concorde flagship, the Harmony of Will. It was damaged, trying to turn and run. A message came from the Velinor ship. It was speakerless. The slippery, confident voice was gone. Now it was shrill with fear. "Human vessel, cease fire. We surrender. We surrender." Captain Lee looked at the image of the frog-like alien on his screen. He thought of Ambassador Chu Yong, alone on that podium. He thought of the people on Mars, running for their lives. "You do not get to surrender," Lee Dae-Hyan said quietly. "You only get to burn." He nodded to Park Ji-woo. The Vengeance's sun lances fired. The bright beams cut the Harmony of Will into 3 neat pieces. The pieces drifted into the burning nebula. The battle was over. The greatest fleet the galaxy had ever assembled was broken. Not by bigger guns, but by a smarter, crueler kind of war. A human kind of war got Lee opened a channel to all the remaining Concorde ships, and to every listening post in the galaxy. "You brought fire to our home. We have shown you what fire truly is. The Concorde is dead. Any who still hold weapons against humanity will share its fate. This is your only warning." He closed the channel. On the bridge, the crew was quiet. They had won a great victory. But the room felt heavy. Commander Park Ji-woo looked at the burning nebula on the screen. "The galaxy blazed," she said, repeating the old words. "Yes," said Captain Lee. "And now they will see by its light exactly what they created." The silence after Cygnus Reach was louder than any explosion. Across 1,000 star systems, species who had called themselves masters of the galaxy stared at their screens. They saw the burning nebula. They saw the broken hulls of their finest ships. The human fleet, sharp and gray and untouched, sat in the middle of it all. A cold stone in a river of fire. On the Velinor homeworld, the leaders gathered in their water chambers. Their slick skin was pale with fear. Speaker Liss was dead. The Harmony of Will was dust. They had no plan. The humans were not just strong. They were clever in a terrible way. They did not fight fair. What did fair even mean to such creatures? The mere hive mind chittered in confusion. They had always followed the strongest. Now, the strongest were not the Concorde. The strongest were the humans. But the humans did not ask for followers. They gave an order, disarm or die. The Mir did not know how to obey such a direct, lonely command. The Cathari homeworld went quiet. Their pride had been burned away at Mars. Now, with the Concorde fleet gone, they were naked before the enemy. Arch Commander Vel's replacement, a younger, less proud commander named Kess, watched the reports. He thought of the human railgun slugs punching through ships. He felt a chill in his blood. For the first time in Cathari history, a message was sent that was not a demand, but a question. It asked for terms that the human answer was the same for everyone. It came from Captain Lee Dae-Hyan, and it was broadcast on every channel. You have one standard galactic day. All military ships are to power down their weapons and drives. All planetary defense systems are to be shut down. Your governments will prepare a full list of all assets taken from human colonies. You will wait. A Terran oversight team will arrive. If any ship is powered, if any gun is loaded, that world will be considered hostile, and it will be silenced. There were no debates, no grand speeches, just a simple, brutal choice. Most chose to live. One day later, the human ghost fleet split apart. It became many smaller fleets. Each one flew to a different homeworld of the Concord species. They went not as conquerors in parade, but as guards on a prison round. The vengeance of Guangzhou itself went to Velinar Prime, the watery world with its shimmering cities. The human ship entered orbit, a dark shadow over the blue planet. On the bridge, Captain Lee looked down. He felt no triumph. Only a tired responsibility. Ambassador Chu Yong stood beside him. She had been rescued from a Concord prison satellite. She looked thinner, older, but her eyes were the same hard stone. They are already fighting among themselves, she said, blaming each other for the betrayal. They are like children caught in a lie. Li Daihayan nodded. Children with very powerful toys. We must take the toys away. He turned to Commander Park Ji-woo. Begin orbital security sweep. Take control of their shipyards and communication hubs. Sergeant Kim Tae-seok will lead the ground teams for verification. Down in the Marine Bay, Sergeant Kim Tae-seok checked his armor for the 10th time. His squad was with him. They were not dropping into a war zone. They were dropping into a surrendered city. It felt strange. Remember, Kim said to his squad, we are not here to scare them. We are here to make sure they are not lying. Be sharp. Be professional. But if anyone raises a weapon, you know what to do. The drop pods shot down through the atmosphere of Velinar Prime. They landed in the main square of the capital, a wide, damp place with beautiful singing fountains. The Velinar people watched from behind windows. Their big, glassy eyes were wide with fear and shame. Kim stepped out of his pod. His powered armor made him 2 meters tall. The Velinar, who were slight and frog-like, looked up at him. A group of their leaders approached, wearing robes of state. They bowed low. We have complied, the head Velinar said, its voice trembling. All systems are off. The list of your assets is being prepared. We will verify. Kim's voice boomed from his armor speaker. He motioned with a giant armored hand. His Marines moved out. They went to the power stations. They went to the defense control rooms. They checked everything. Everywhere it was the same. The Velinar had shut everything down. They were too scared to try a trick. Back in orbit, the reports came in from all the other fleets. The Mir had complied. The Zelos had complied. Even the Cathari, with great hissing anger, had powered down their mighty warships. It was over. The war had lasted weeks. The peace, if you could call it that, was achieved in a day. That night, on the Vengeance, Captain Lee called his senior staff to the observation deck. They looked out at the stars and at the peaceful, dark world below. No lights from weapons or shields. Just the soft glow of cities. Chief Engineer Shin Yuna sighed. It is done. We won. She said it like it was a question. We broke their fleet, said Commander Park Ji-woo. But what did we win? A galaxy that fears us. They should fear us, said Sergeant Kim, joining them. His face was clean now, out of the armor. He looked tired. They did not listen when we asked nicely. Captain Lee was quiet for a long time. He watched the planet. Fear is not a foundation. It is a weapon. And you cannot build a home with a weapon. It is only good for making sure no one steals your home again. He turned to them. We are not their new rulers. We are their reminder. A permanent, angry reminder of the cost of betrayal. He thought of the human colonies, now being reclaimed. He thought of the people on Mars, rebuilding their dome. He thought of the silent, burning wreckage at Cygnus Reach. We showed them the fire, Lee said. Now we must show them the fence. We will stay. We will watch. We will make sure they never forget what happens when they push humanity into a corner. Our job is not to celebrate. Our job is to ensure this never, ever has to happen again. The group fell silent. The victory felt heavy. There were no cheers. No parties on the ship. The crew worked quietly. They had done what was needed. It was ugly, but it was done. Across the galaxy, on 100 worlds, the message was understood. The old galactic concord was gone. In its place was a new reality. A reality where humans, the peaceful, patient, hopeful humans, were now the strongest. And they were not forgiving. They were not kind. They were just. And their justice was as cold and hard as space. The age of human hope was over. A new age had begun. An age of human certainty. The galaxy had blazed. And in the ashes, only one rule remained: do not betray Earth. 10 standard years passed. The galaxy was a different place. It was not a happy place, but it was a quiet one. A careful one. The human fleets did not go home. They stayed. They patrolled the shipping lanes. They orbited the capital worlds. Their ships, still sharp and gray, were a constant sight in the skies. A reminder: on Velinar Prime, the singing fountains in the main square still worked. Now, a simple black stone pillar stood in the middle of them. On it, in both human script and Velinar glyphs, were the names of the human colonists who died on Proxima Centauri b every year. On the anniversary of the betrayal, the Velinar leaders had to stand before it. They had to say the names out loud. They hated it, but they did it. The mere hive mind now produced intricate art and complex machinery. They traded it with human stations for certain metals and medicines. They followed human trade laws exactly. They never, ever built a warship. The Catharian world was under a permanent watch. A ring of human monitor satellites circled their planet. The Cathari could travel, they could trade, but they could not build a military. Every ship they made was checked by human inspectors. Their pride was a cold, bitter ash. They would not rise again for 100 generations. Captain Lee Dehayan was an admiral now. His hair was streaked with gray. He stood on the observation deck of a new ship, the Steadfast. It was just as angular as the Vengeance, but bigger. He looked at the reports on his datapad. Production quotas from the Mir, resource transfers from the Velinar. All in order. Peace, maintained by relentless, quiet strength. Commander Park Ji-woo was his second in command of the whole fleet now. She visited him on the Steadfast. She found him looking at an old picture. It was an image of the old galactic Concord chamber, shining and beautiful. Do you ever miss it? She asked softly. The idea of it? All of us together, in peace? Lee put the picture down. I miss the dream, he said. But I do not miss the liars who pretended to share it. A dream built on a lie is a prison. What we have now is solid. It is heavy, but it is honest. On Earth, life had changed too. The fear was gone. The desperation was gone. But a hardness had entered the human spirit. They were not the hopeful young species anymore. They were the veterans, the watchmen. Children in schools learned about the betrayal and the blazing. They learned that the galaxy was not a friendly place. They learned that strength, hidden and ready, was the only true shield. Ambassador Chu Yong was back on Earth. She lived in a quiet house by a lake. She wrote her memoirs. Sometimes young diplomats visited her. They asked for advice. She always gave the same answer. Hope is a plan for yourself. Trust is a gift for others. Never confuse the two. And always, always have a hidden knife. One day, a signal came to Admiral Lee's ship. It was from a small, new species on the edge of explored space. They called themselves the Tulla. They were plant-like, gentle. They had heard the stories. They had seen the human patrols. They were requesting permission to open trade talks. They were scared. Lee decided to go himself. He took the Steadfast and flew to the Tulla homeworld. It was a green, lush planet. Their ships were simple, made of polished wood and green vines. The Tulla leaders met him in a grove of great trees. They trembled as his shuttle landed. They expected a monster. A creature of fire and metal. Admiral Lee stepped out. He was not in armor. He wore his simple black uniform. He saw their fear. He remembered Ambassador Chu Young standing small before the Concorde. "We mean you no harm," Lee said, his voice calm. "You have asked to talk, so we will talk." The Tulla were shocked. The human was not shouting. He was not making threats. He was just there, solid, real. They talked for hours. The Tulla explained their needs. Lee explained the rules. The one big rule: you may grow. You may explore. You may join the community of worlds. But if you ever raise your hand against humanity or any weaker species under our protection, we will cut it off. This is not a threat. It is a fact of physics. Like gravity. The Tulla understood. They agreed. The talks ended. As Lee was leaving, the oldest Tulla, a being with bark-like skin, spoke. "We heard you were made of wrath, that you burned the galaxy." Lee paused at the ramp of his shuttle. He looked back at the green world, at the innocent, fearful faces. "We contain wrath," he corrected gently, "so that others do not have to learn what it looks like. Your galaxy is peaceful because ours is not. Remember that." The shuttle door closed. On the journey back, Park Ji-woo reviewed the treaty. "It is a fair deal. For them and for us." "It is," Lee said. "We are not tyrants. We are shepherds with very sharp teeth. The galaxy is our flock now. We keep the wolves away, even if we sometimes have to be the wolf, so the others remember how sharp teeth can be." That night, Admiral Lee looked at the stars from his cabin. He thought about the long journey, from hope to betrayal to fire, and now to this. Quiet, endless watch. He did not know if it was better. He knew it was necessary. He opened a channel and recorded a message. It was for the history files, for the humans who would come after. "This is Admiral Lee Dae-hyun. The war is long over. The peace is held. Do not think we are heroes. We are what they made us. Do not love this peace, because it is not built on love. Respect it, because it is built on truth. The truth that we will never be betrayed again. We stand watch, so that our children can dream again. And maybe, in 100 or 1,000 years, those dreams can be soft. Because we were hard." He sent the message. Then he went back to work. There were patrol schedules to check, reports to read, a galaxy to watch. The stars outside burned cold and steady, just like the human fleet. Always there, always watching. A silent promise in the dark. The galaxy had blazed, and from its ashes a new order rose, simple and clear. Humanity would endure, and they would ensure, forever, that no one ever forgot the price of making them angry.